Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. We'll give everybody a few minutes to get in before we start digging into our webinar titled Hypervisors and Flux, Maximize VMware Value and Know Your Options. So while everybody's joining, my name is Michelle from the TribalHub team. If you wouldn't mind using the chat to let us know where everyone's calling in from, as many of you know, that's like my favorite part of doing a webinar, seeing where everyone's calling in from. I see you, Alex. I see Kevin, Michael, a lot of West Coast folks out here. Philip, very cool to see you guys. So thank you for joining. Most of our panel is kind of all over, but West Coast-ish is what I'm feeling. So we have some Washington, Vegas, and the lowly San Diego friend who is in the 90s where everyone else is in the 30s. So, oh, hey, Rob. See Rob, Tony, Ryan. Awesome. Sweet, sweet, sweet. Oh, another San Diego. Jeez. Good stuff. All right, well, why don't we get into some of the housekeeping things before we really dig into our presentation today, which is brought to you by Arctiq. Thank you so much for being here, everybody, and for partnering with us on this webinar. Our presenters today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves when we start, but you'll have Chris, Jason, Jeremy. Oop, Linda is not here. Matt and Matthew. Sorry, I should have looked at that beforehand. So they will all be on the call today, and we're going to do kind of like a little fireside chat type situation today, which is I love doing that. I think it's really a great way to engage. So while you are listening to them, please make sure you use the chat or the Q&A feature on Zoom to shoot them over your questions. Now is a great time if you do have questions or concerns. Now is the time to get those and get some answers. The session will be recorded. You will receive an email tomorrow from Zoom with a link to our YouTube channel where you can forward the video recording to anybody else on your team who may have missed it, or if you need to rewatch it again, it'll be there for you. And a couple of learning objectives to take away from the webinar while you're listening to the team here in their panel, things to keep in mind. And again, just a last reminder, don't forget about using that chat for your questions. I'm going to end my part of this webinar today by reminding you about our Cybersecurity Summit, which is coming up in February in Florida. We have registration open on tribalhub.com, so check that out if you're interested. And with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Jason, to start our presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Jason Riddle. I'm a principal architect here at Arctiq. And today we're cutting through the noise in the hypervisor market. No fear, uncertainty, or doubt, just actionable insights. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, our advisor for Tribal Enterprise.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Also excited, like Michelle said, about Cybersecurity Summit coming up. So just another plug for that. We hope to be participating as well. And there's all kinds of good stuff that is coming. So make sure you attend and get set up for that. Today, you'll notice there's a poll that just popped up. If you guys can participate, we're going to do a few of these for two reasons. One, we want to know more about you. But the other thing is it keeps people engaged, because if we get really, really boring, then you can just wait for the next poll and it's super exciting. So that's two reasons to do the polls. But on a serious note, really excited to be here. My name is Jeremy James. I've been working in Tribal Enterprise. Many of you I met or know. If I don't know you, then next time we're at TribalNet, I owe you a drink, whatever that might be, tea or coffee, of course. And we'd love to get to know you. I get to represent Arctiq today, and the smart guys in the room here with Jason, with Matt, with Chris, we're going to talk about a subject that I think is not always exciting to talk about, but is certainly important to talk about for the business, which today is about hypervisors. It's going to talk a little bit about VMware, talk about some of the decisions that folks are making. All of those things have massive relevant business interests. And myself, as a previous CIO in Indian country for Tolowa Nation, and then later on as a consultant advisor to many different suppliers and vendors that we all work with, these are topics that have been going on for now decades. And as the landscape changes, are highly, highly relevant. So I'm going to be learning a lot today from Chris, from Matt, from Jason. And my job here is to ask them questions that you guys would otherwise ask. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as well. They're going to be teaching me. I'm going to pepper them with questions, but mostly they're going to be teaching. And the outcome is going to be for you guys, hopefully, to have something that you leave with today you didn't know before. At the end of this, the other outcome is going to be just use this and abuse us. Ping us after the session. Look us up. There's a landing page. There'll be a slide you can QR code to. We want to work with you on the education side. We know you've got vendors you're working with. That's awesome. What we want to make sure is that everybody in tribal enterprise or in any country, and the rest of the continent, if we've got Canadians on, and any indigenous community gets the benefit of this conversation and make good decisions. That's our job. That's why we're here. And obviously, it's why TribalHub exists and TribalNet, the event exists, is to share the information that we have so everybody gets a benefit. So that being said, Mr. Riddle, you've got an agenda and you've got a slide deck. I'll let you kick that off, and then I'll bug you as you get through these topics because there's some hotness here that we want to talk about.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, it's just as I mentioned earlier, Jason Riddle, principal architect here at Arctiq, and I'd like to kind of introduce the rest of the team here. Chris, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. My name's Chris Moon. I'm also a principal architect with Arctiq. I've been doing virtualization for many years. So I'm kind of excited for this webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. How about you, Stu?
Yeah, I'm Matthew Stewart, go by Stu. I've been with Arctiq about 8 years now, and I'm in a delivery consultant role. So
Perfect. Thank you, Stu.
Jason, you're not sharing anything if you want to.
Oh, am I not sharing anything? Well, that's good information to have. Thank you. All right, let's try this. Is that a lot better?
Yep.
All right, great. And so, as Jeremy said, we're here to clarify, not complicate, hypervisor decision that everyone's facing. And we don't want to just talk at you. We want to make sure that you leave out here with 2 quick wins and a framework for the next 6 to 12 months. Can we put on the next poll, please? Jeremy, do you want to take us through this poll?
Yeah, just real quickly, everybody, the point here, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. What's the main driver for what's going on? We know that there's a lot of licensing changes. The Broadcom world has changed that a lot from the olden days, from the Wayback Machine. What are you looking at? What's your timeline? What are your modernization goals? Not all questions you might have or answers are here, but give us the general feeling. You can pick as many as you want so that we have an idea where to focus our conversation.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so we'll keep this practical, right? Your time is valuable. We're going to do this in 5 chunks, about 10 minutes each. We're going to share a few polls and examples along the way. All right, VMware 2024-2025, what changed? Okay, so I'll hit a couple of the points that I kind of want to hit, and then I'll turn it over to Chris Moon. But as most of you know, VMware has turned into a subscription-only model. Broadcom ended perpetual licenses across the VMware portfolio in December of 2023. VMware still dominates the industry from a maturity and tooling integration perspective, along with market share. The licensing is changed. Now it is per core with minimums. So the core counting rules, our minimums are 16 cores per CPU with a minimum purchase of 72 cores per purchase. And I will turn it over to Chris. Do you have anything to add?
I do. Thank you, Jason. So yeah, as Jason mentioned, they have moved to a subscription. They've also decided that they're going to move away from single products, right? So, at one point VMware had, I don't know, 10,000 SKUs or something. It was an insane amount. Their price book was 1,000 pages long. They've decided to simplify that, and what they've done is, starting in just a couple days here, there's only going to be 2 options, right? There's going to be an option called VVF, and there's going to be another option called VCF. That's going to be a drastic shift from what you guys are used to, right? Where you buy VMware, you buy vCenter, and that's all you need, right? So what's going to happen with these packages is there's going to be more software included, right? So it's not just going to be the hypervisor. You're going to get, NSX. You're going to get kind of all of the other products that VMware has in their portfolio, and that will be the only way to buy VMware. So there are kind of drastic changes to what they're doing in licensing, right? Well, and kind of the important thing here is what does that do to cost? Right. Well, because you're now no longer buying just a single product, right? In a lot of cases, you're buying a bundle of products, right? So there's going to be some cost adjustments there, depending on which subscription you buy, right? Whether you buy VVF or VCF. The other thing that I wanted to make sure I covered is Jason mentioned that there's now a minimum core count. Yeah, and when you look at, saying, hey, we've got to buy 16 cores, that's the minimum number per socket, right? What you've really got to do is you've got to say, okay, let's start looking at our hosts, right? If our hosts are 12 cores and, we've got, say a single host has got two 12-core procs in it, right? So that would be 24 cores that you actually need, but you're going to have to buy 32, to hit that minimum. So in cases, so there needs to be a fair bit of work, kind of upfront to kind of get those core counts and figure out what your actual cost is going to be. And in some cases it may make sense to change your hardware around to account for the core minimums.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense, Chris.
So Jason, can I ask a question about something that both you and Chris just kind of brought up about features? This came up in a conversation yesterday with a customer that Jason Gordon and I were talking to. But on this topic, as we get going, with all the features and all the things that could come with the packages now, should folks be, and you guys have to answer this now, but it's a bigger question, should folks be saying, hey, I get all these features, I got to have that package? Or is there still a strategy where you say, listen, I may not need 17 of the 27 things. I need to do what's good for my business. I mean, I'm leading you into this question, but I think that's a good topic because we get people that ask us, but I get all these features. The question then becomes, do you need all the features and are you ready for all the features? So do you guys see that coming up a lot? And again, however you want to tackle that, I think it's a really interesting point that people ask all the time.
Oh, it totally makes sense, Jeremy. I think we're going to cover that on our next slide. So thank you for bringing that up. Something I did want to bring up, right, with the portfolio simplification is a partner reshuffle, right? Not all the same partners that were VMware Broadcom partners before are still there. So we are one of the partners. I believe they've taken that list down to 300 partners in the US. In addition to that, I also wanted to bring up for customers that have recently renewed their Enterprise Plus or Standard, the version 8 is the max you can upgrade to. So the next time you renew and you want to go to 9, you're going to have to look at BVF or VCF. So wanted to make sure I called out those other things. Anything else, Chris, before we move on to the next slide?
No, I think we covered everything that I wanted to.
All right. Great. Let's move on to the next slide, and then we can talk about Jeremy's question. All right. So first of all, right, what we wanted to do is have you come away with here with some actionable stuff, right? One of them was a quick win, right? So what is the quick win here, right? Number one is right size your license cores. Kind of what, Chris was saying earlier. Look at low utility clusters. A lot of times customers will, when they renew their hardware, they'll go buy a new cluster and they'll put it in production, and then they'll take the old cluster and then they'll go put it either in a DR area or another closet. And then that'll kind of be where, the science projects go, and, the anything that's, QA and development, that kind of test stuff kind of goes there, right? So I would say, number one, right, make sure you go and look and see what you actually have for ESXi hosts, and make sure that you're utilizing those as needed, right, before that license comes up for renewal. So decommission zombie hosts, consolidate before renewal counts are pulled. Chris?
So I wanted to add to that kind of quickly, right? I mean, the other thing we can do here, the other thing to keep in mind here, right, is that we're talking about right sizing your clusters, right, and that's important. But you also have the option to right size your VMs. Right. So what can happen is, over the years, right, people will size VMs, based on whatever spec they have at the time. That spec may or may not be right. So, what we can do is, so one of the options you have is actually to take a look at what your, how your VMs are configured, and potentially, remove resources from VMs that don't need it. In a large organization, right, changing 1,000 VMs or 500 VMs can lead to very, very sizable differences in the number of hosts that are needed, right? So, we did this for a client, and we were able to cut like 15 hosts off their cluster capacity. So, that ended up saving them money because they didn't need to license those hosts anymore. Here at Arctiq, we do have some services that we can offer, and we can install a collector out on your site, and we can actually go and help you, figure out which VMs are oversized or which VMs are undersized, or whatever the case may be, to help you get to that right number.
Makes sense. Yeah. And then quick win number 2, implement the features included, right? This goes back to Jeremy's question. You bought this thing. Do you need to implement all those features? I think you need to look at that with a critical eye to see what features you're actually using and what you could do to maximize the return on investment in the software that you've already invested in, right? So if, for example, you've got, you purchased an NSX because that comes in the VCF bundle, right? Perhaps you could displace some of your firewalls, right? Or if you purchased Avi and you want to roll that out, that could possibly displace some server load balancers. So I think if you have it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go implement it, but if you have it and it could possibly help your bottom line from a business perspective to displace some other technologies, that probably is something that should be looked at from a critical perspective. A lot of times people buy software, they implement the minimums, they get it up and working, and then they're onto the next hair on fire solution, right? The next thing that's coming down the pipe. So a lot of times, those extra features go unused, and you don't realize the gains that you probably could have had if you had deployed that and then displaced some other technology. So if you guys find yourself in that situation, feel free to reach out. That's something that we can help as well. Chris, would you like to sum up kind of what we talked about so far?
Yeah, I mean, so really the point of, this slide, right, is the action, the thing to take away from this, right, is it's going to be a good idea to take a look at your environment and really kind of take a hard look and really right size both both your hardware capacity and your VMs, and then take a look at all the software that you have, and sit down with your teams and figure out, hey, does this feature make sense? For example, Avi load balancer, right? Does it make sense to implement Avi, and will that allow us to, cut some money out of our F5 budget? By doing those two things, I think you can drastically kind of change the ROI conversation, around your virtualization environment.
Perfect. So Jeremy, does that answer your question? I think you asked in the last slide.
I think it kind of does. I mean, I think everybody asks those questions. You talk about Avi, you talk about, I mean, we go again, I'm going to take us way back a little bit to the NSX conversations back in the day, right? That's a strategy, not just a product. And microsegmentation, about security posture, about lots of things have an impact on that. We know that there's a lot of commit when you go into looking at these tools and making that a major part of your environment. So, is that something you want to do because you have a license? Maybe. But maybe that's something you want to do because that's strategic, and certainly you want to be talking about whether you want to implement because you have it or because you need it, or that's a long game. NSX is a good example, and I'm not playing dogma here on either side, but that's I think we all know this, and you guys can speak to it better than I can. That's a decision you make that has long-lasting benefits or long-lasting implications to the business. So that's where I was headed. It was a good answer. Thank you guys both for kind of going into that, because I think it's probably one of those questions that people say, hey, if I got the thing, should I turn it on? These things are big implications, and they're awesome potentially, but you've got to have a strategy.
Got to have a strategy. You have to make sure you implement that strategy, and then you don't want to, half implement something, right? You want to implement it with a strategy in mind and take it all the way to the finish line. And a lot of times we're busy, right? A lot of engineering teams, they're rushing to the next thing. So absolutely right, Jeremy. It's something that you don't want to kind of half enter in and just kind of leave abandoned, right? So thank you for that. All right, for our next slide here, we wanted to make sure that we left you with a framework, right? So based on these shifts in the marketplace, right? Where are you at today? And then where are you going? And, a lot of times, like I said, I believe I said earlier, these virtualization solutions, right, are, maybe were before not I guess maybe you weren't getting the value out of them, right? But so now it's like this could be a step-by-step framework for your hypervisor strategy. Like when you leave this webinar today, it would be nice to say, hey, we've got a plan, right? This could be the beginning of that plan, right? So the first step is, assess your current solution ROI, right? Are you guys happy with it? Evaluate your return on investment potential for the deployments that you've got today, based on your renewal, based on new purchases, based on what your hardware looks like today and where you are in your life cycle. Just assess that to kind of determine, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are you guys seeing the value that you need to from your solution? The next thing would be to identify future triggers, right? Any key triggers such as, enterprise license agreements or renewals coming up. If you've got either a leadership discussion about disaster recovery coming up, or maybe there's a lot more interest in, we're seeing ransomware situations going on. What does that look like? How are you going to recover in one of those situations, right? And any M&A activities, right? Mergers and acquisitions. What does that mean to you, right? These are, we're kind of breaking these down into business objectives, but really, we as IT, and a lot of us here are leaders, have to be able to take, the technology and turn it into understanding so that we can bring it to the business so that they understand what what we're talking about and what the needs are in order to achieve their objectives. If you identify that you do want to look at alternatives, right? Make sure you score them, right? Compare your alternatives based on the total cost of ownership, right? What your risk level is and the operational fit. A lot of teams here have, grown up on VMware and cut their teeth on it, and that's their main skill set, right? So you've got to take all those different things into your discussion there. So, and
Jason,
then
on that,
yeah, go
let me
ahead, Jeremy.
interrupt you there for a question, because triggers and alternatives, I think probably somewhere in there, we're not overtly talking cloud today. We're talking about prem hypervisor, but that could seriously be a trigger, obviously. And I know that Chris can probably lean on this question too. So when we look at triggers, cloud strategy, and then alternatives, we're going to get to that a little bit. I know what's coming in the slide deck, but part of that is worth a conversation. There's likely no one on this call that doesn't have a strategy around cloud for something, whether it's secondary, tertiary, targets, backup, whatever it might be, DR. How does that find its way into the triggers, alternatives, pilot plan as we use cloud as kind of a theme in this too?
Yeah, I think we've all kind of been there, Jeremy. Let me take a shot at the question and then I'll turn it over to you, Chris. So yeah, I mean, your CIO goes to a cloud conference, they come back and we're cloud first, right? Is it cloud first? Is it cloud smart, right? So I think those are two different things you kind of have to discuss. Like, what is the actual strategy? Based on that, a lot of times not everything can go in the cloud unless that's kind of what you're trying to achieve. And I think you have to look at each one of your workloads and, how much latency they can suffer, that kind of stuff. So a lot of customers are keeping whatever they have on-prem, right? And then they are either using like cloud native tools in their hyperscalers so that they can have a cloud presence as well. You're kind of getting the best of both benefits, right? Use cloud where it makes sense, for prototyping and that kind of stuff, and then bring that back on-prem. Other people are saying we're only cloud first, everything goes up in the cloud. So there are other options here with your hypervisor strategy. A lot of the bare metal clusters, you can get these same hypervisors in the cloud, and then that gives you kind of the same, I guess, piece of glass that so you can see your whole environment. And other customers are seeing it so that they're managing it with two different skill sets, maybe sometimes two different teams, maybe two different standards, right? Maybe they don't follow the same RPO, RTO strategies. So that's something to consider is, what is your cloud strategy? And then how does that fit with your on-prem virtualization strategy as well? Chris, you got any thoughts there?
I do, yeah. I would say 5 or 6 years ago, I sat down with clients of all sizes, kind of all over the place, and the common theme I got was, hey, we're going to be moving everything to the cloud. And so over the last, I don't know, say, that was probably about 7 years ago, right? And the last, say, 4 years, what my clients are saying is, hey, we moved everything to the cloud, and now we're paying too much, right? And now we've got to bring that stuff back in from the cloud. And so I kind of agree with Jason, right? I think part of your strategy has to be to take a look at your workloads, take a look at the software you're running, take a look at what you actually need, and make sense and make decisions, right? There are certain applications that make sense in the cloud, right? There are certain applications that don't. And I think part of a cloud strategy has got to be taking a look at those applications and making making decisions that give you the most flexibility while also kind of reducing cost. As cloud has become more prevalent over the last decade, one of the things we're seeing, and Jason touched on this, is that we can now put cloud functionality inside your data center, right? So we now have the ability to run VMs on-prem, and we know that our busy time is coming and we need more resources. We can move those workloads up to the cloud, run them in the cloud for the time that we need, and move them back down. So it's kind of an exciting time where we've got a ton of flexibility, based on and you can make some really, really good decisions and really kind of use both on-prem and cloud to support your operational needs.
Well, and that's where I was going with that question was we're having virtualization conversation, which predominantly everybody goes instantly to prem, data center, my physical stuff. And then there's this cloud conversation like you just mentioned, but it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, right? It's not to shout one way or the other, but that virtualization strategy, to Jason's point about this framework, is that we've got to have a plan. Like you said, Chris, some things have to go in certain places or they're better there for risk. It's all about a risk conversation. Everything we do is risk mitigation. So now all of a sudden we can have this conversation and say, okay, but maybe, and our virtualization strategy doesn't just limit us to what's on the box in the room next to us or in the server room or in the MDF. It might actually have an implication. We don't have to think about that as a completely separate thing. Like, okay, we're leaving hypervisor X behind, right? Because like you're saying, there's going to be potentially there's a hybrid strategy, but also we can move things around like better than we ever have.
Yep,
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. And then we can go the other way as well, right? Where you've got the on-prem hypervisors that are traditional. You can now go bare metal in the cloud. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, you can use that one pane of glass to be able to manage your whole environment. So there's no one solution that fits, there's no one size fits all here, right? It's specifically about your business and what your, how you want to manage it and, your team skill set and where you want to go. So by all means, let's, reach out to us and we can have further conversations. This stuff is, I find exciting. I love having these types of conversations about strategy and, where people are and where they want to go, right? Let's start with the end in mind. Let's come up with a roadmap to get you there. Okay, so we talked about assessing the current solution ROI. We talked about identifying any triggers, right? We talked about scoring alternatives. Now a pilot plan. If you guys decide that you do want to look at a different hypervisor, right? You should come up with a POC, right? POC should not stand for production, of course. So it should have a plan that has, a beginning and an end. Hey, we're going to start this. We're going to do this thing. It's going to run for 90 days. Here are the success criteria. And then what happens on day 91? It can't just be we put a bunch of production stuff on there and then now we're managing multiple hypervisors. That's probably not the best way to move forward. So I would say definitely look at your pilot plan, make sure that it's got a beginning and ending, success criteria, and then what's the plan on day 91 or 181 days, whatever time frame you choose. And then the last one is really, decision making, right? Decide whether to stay, move, or overlay based on your pilot results and come up with strategic considerations. So Chris and I do this all the time. We sit with customers and we can go over this step-by-step framework and help you with any one of these steps. If you guys got it, then that's good too. But we definitely wanted to make sure we communicated this to everybody out there. Chris, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, just as as you guys are potentially looking to change your hypervisors or to make a move, and this really applies to any proof of concept, right? The biggest thing for me here is that pilot plan, right? I've been involved in way too many of these where it just goes nowhere because nobody knows what the objectives are, right? So at least in my mind, the key takeaway from this is as you're looking to move to to potentially move to a new hypervisor or move some of your workloads to the cloud or whatever the case may be, really make sure you've got a solid pilot plan and you know what success looks like. Otherwise, I will guarantee you that it's not going to go anywhere.
The never-ending POC, and it just turns into production. And then 5 years later, it's like, why do we have multiple hybrid? I don't know. Okay, no, definitely makes sense. All right, so here's some options. We kind of threw a comparison table together. We don't, this is kind of an eye chart. This is kind of busy, so apologies for that. If we looked at all the different options that were out there from a hypervisor perspective, there would be, 18 pages, right? There's a lot of stuff out here. So really, we're going to hit like one or two of these, and then, just kind of wanted to put some stuff out there so that you guys had some information, kind of thinking things through. Jeremy, did you have any questions before we get started?
Just to mention a result of the poll that Michelle put up a little bit earlier, it looks like scale-wise, most folks are kind of in that space where there's tens or dozens, and then hundreds and below that number. So from a scale perspective, as we talk about this, I think that's probably most relevant. We're not talking Boeing here, and we're not talking. We just put our first open source ESXi box together. We've got real people with real, kind of real production environments, and some of them have hundreds of these things. So with that being said, your guys' insight, I know you've got some focus areas in this chart. Your guys' insight is pretty valuable because maybe not everybody's played with some of the stuff in this space. So I'm curious about where you take it. Knock yourself out.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, so I'm going to just go over the top one, right? Nutanix AHV. This is a great solution. It is hyper-converged infrastructure. Traditionally, other hypervisors could have disaggregated storage. That's the traditional 3-tier, right, where you've got your storage separate on a SAN. Or a NAS, right? So with Nutanix, that is not the case currently. That's all hyper-converged. I do believe they mentioned earlier that they're looking at expanding that to Pure. So they may have they're planning on having a solution in place. I believe it's the end of this year for Pure connectivity, which is exciting. But right now, it's mostly focused on hyper-converged infrastructure. I know Dell also has a couple of other arrays that will connect with Nutanix today. The migration and tooling are pretty similar. It's a competitive TCO. What was interesting before was that Nutanix, is the software-defined storage, and you could put any, and you can today put any hypervisor on it. So you could put Hyper-V on it. You could put VMware on it, and then they have their own AHV. But for this discussion, you could stand up AHV on 2 to 3 nodes. You could migrate a couple of workloads. You could look at a DR runbook. Something that you have to be aware of is that you kind of can't back into a Nutanix solution. If you guys are 2 years into an 8-year refresh cycle, this may not make a lot of good sense for you, right? Because you need to purchase hardware that's based off their hardware compatibility list. Nothing new under the sun. That's always been the case. But a lot of times, you can kind of make stuff work. And for this, I think you just want to make sure that your hardware refresh timing is solid. Anything for you to add on that, Chris?
Yeah, I like Nutanix quite a bit. We do a lot of Nutanix work. One of the questions I get all the time is, is it as rock solid as VMware has been, right? Because traditionally, I've got many clients who, they pay for VMware support, but they've never had to call them. And one of the things that I get, the same question around Nutanix, is it as reliable? And the answer is yes, right? Nutanix, as well as some of these others, the hypervisor under the hood is called KVM. It's a Linux-based hypervisor, and KVM is used in the hyperscalers, right? It's used in the largest organizations in the world. If it's good enough for them, it's certainly good enough for my needs, right? So I really like what Nutanix is doing. From their ecosystem is slowly getting bigger, right? So, one of the challenges with moving away from VMware is how do you deal with the ecosystem, right? How do we back it up and those types of things. And Nutanix has gone gangbusters in the market, and kind of that ecosystem is growing significantly kind of over time. So now we have enterprise backup solutions that will support AHV. Traditionally, where things were deployed via OVA and only supported on VMware, vendors are now saying, hey, we will now support this on AHV. So when you look at kind of all of the things in this list, Nutanix is one that stands out to me, kind of head and shoulders, kind of above the rest. But Jason, you're right that it does need to be refreshed. It does need to be timed with a hardware refresh, right? Because if we look at the numbers, Just comparing software to software, the math isn't going to math. But when we've got a full infrastructure refresh happening, or potentially we're spinning up a new property somewhere, right? When those types of things are happening, where where hardware is a consideration, Nutanix is a great fit.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. That's good information to have. I don't think I'm going to go into detail on any of the other ones. Is there any other ones you wanted to hit, Chris, to maybe go into more detail on?
Yeah, the kind of up and coming one that I'm super excited about is HP's the VM Essentials and Morpheus. When you look at, kind of when you look at these two, right, we kind of have them, they're two separate products, but they tie in together really, really well. So we kind of kept them as one because it makes a lot of sense to have, to have both, right? Um, you know, HP kind of a couple of years ago, they decided that they were going to build their own hypervisor, and they kind of went down this path, and kind of said they were going to started doing it, and then they bought a company called Morpheus. And when they started looking at what Morpheus was doing, Morpheus had already written their own hypervisor and was using it for all of their internal stuff. So HP said, "Well, why are we going to reinvent the wheel? Why are we going to reinvent the wheel? What we're going to do is we're going to use what we already have." And they renamed the Morpheus hypervisor to VM Essentials, and they took it to market. Like I said, I'm really, really excited about this. The pricing is core based, so we don't have to deal with, core counts and it's socket based. We don't have to deal with core counts or any of that stuff. Again, it's based off of KVM, so I have no concerns about the stability, right? I have no concerns about the scalability, right? Because it's based off a tried and true, kind of hypervisor. And then what HP did was they took the software company they bought, Morpheus, and they put that as the ability to go on top of it, right? So what is Morpheus? Well, Morpheus is it's a cloud kind of automation and VM automation software, right? So, you can kind of think of it as vCenter on steroids to manage VME. But with Morpheus, it'll manage more than just VME, right? With Morpheus, we can manage VME, we can manage our cloud environment, we can manage Nutanix, and it'll give us, visibility into, what our costs are. To let us do application orchestration, right? We can say, hey, we want to deploy a VM and we want to put this software stack on it, right? We can create a runbook to make that happen. So HP is going gangbusters on adding new features to both of these, to really kind of, they see a need in the market, and they're trying to capitalize on it. And right now they're doing a good job. What I would say, kind of a word of caution is I am very, very excited about this. But there are some kind of downsides, right? This is a new hypervisor in the market. So we talked about, with VMware, the tooling was there, and it's a very mature market. Nutanix is getting there. HP is the new kid on the block, right? So, they're the same kind of, you're not going to have the same vendor support that you do with, say, something like VMware. But because it is KVM based, kind of getting those things into VME is going to be, not as hard as it once was.
I might throw a log on that fire too a little bit. I worked with the Morpheus team for a number of years until a few years ago, and all the stuff you said, I'm excited about too, because we kind of been waiting for some of this to happen. Morpheus actually originally came out of some incubation HP did like 10 years ago. They did a bunch of cool stuff. The GreenLake product for their hardware as a service play has a Morpheus integration. It's a major part of it. And now all of a sudden, everything you just mentioned is now real, right? And going to market. The cool thing is that team has a deep bench and deep understanding. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. So while they're new kids on the block in the hypervisor space, the Morpheus team itself and the technical bits and the money that leadership at HP is throwing into that is substantial, and it's doing more than just hypervisor. It's doing all kinds of cool hardware as a service stuff. So while today isn't about that topic, if anybody wants to geek out on that, Chris obviously is excited about it. I'm excited about it. There's a lot going on there, and HP is making some really cool inroads. It's not limited to hypervisor. Lots of other ways that potentially could be of interest down the road when people are starting to look at their refresh cycles in the next few years. So I'm glad you brought it up, Chris. It's a really cool topic, and it's changing the way a little bit Morpheus also does a lot of analytics presentation stuff for us to get a lot more data on our hardware platform. So really, really cool. I thought I'd throw that out there, and I'm really glad you guys added some alternatives. I know, Jason, you aren't going to talk about all of them because maybe not everybody here is looking at the same kind of scale, like with OpenShift and Azure Stack and all that. But like you said, there could be 18 more slides if we started talking about alternatives, which is a whole fun conversation to have. And KVM has been mentioned as the heart and soul of a lot of these things. If you guys are out there playing with that kind of stuff, put a comment in the chat, because if you guys are playing with KVM and even just the open source kind of way, let us know. Let us have that conversation with you, because it's good stuff, and these guys they love geeking out on it. So thank you guys for bringing up the alternatives. I think it's a great topic.
Yeah, thanks, guys. The last thing I kind of want to talk about on this slide really is, best practice around tool strategy, right? Like, this is a lot of information that we're kind of throwing at you, but don't forget about, the tools that you have to manage your environment, the tools that you need to back up your solution, also things like appliances, and make sure that they're supported. So from a backup strategy, I've seen where, some of the make sure that whatever backup solution you have will work in the same way, right? Traditionally, everybody knows how, a top tier backup solution works with vCenter, right? It goes in, it talks to vCenter, quiesces the server, it takes a snapshot, it backs it up that way, and then you can restore pretty easily. Some of the other backup solutions may not be that way with some of these other options. So a lot of those other ones may work with them, but that's going to be more agent based, which means you're backing up the system state and the files within the VM itself. And that makes it a little bit more cumbersome when you recover. So just validate, whatever your current backup solution will work with whatever you're looking at as a possible POC. And then make sure that any appliances that you have are supported on there. There are some specific ones that we could mention that are only supported on certain platforms, but that's something that you probably want to do your due diligence ahead of time, and that shouldn't be a gotcha at the end of your POC. So awesome.
Hey, Jason, I just wanted to respond to something real quick. So Kevin in the chat, he posted that, pure connectivity is what has us looking at Nutanix. And we're hearing that a lot, right? We're hearing from from a lot of our customers that hey, I like Nutanix, but I don't buy into the whole hyper-converged space. Sure. And I agree with you, Kevin. I'm excited about it too, right? Because now it gives us options, right? It gives us the ability to, if we want to do hyper-converged, great, we can. If we don't have to, and we still get all of the same bells and whistles that we'll get, that Nutanix brings to the table, but we don't have to do all of the hyper-converged stuff. So I agree with you, and I'm excited about that too. As always, right? The devil's in the details, right? And both Pure and Nutanix have been oddly tight-lipped about what that integration is actually going to look like. But I do, I'm excited about it as well.
All right, so thanks for that, Chris. So this really is a case study. I just wanted to kind of highlight something that we've gone through with a customer of ours, right? They had, cost constraints, they had aging virtualization hardware. So, talking to them, right, we came in, did a free VMware assessment, and then found that they've got, aging virtualization hardware. We found that they were using like Synology NAS as their storage platform. And then we found that they had another, they basically did what a lot of customers did, right? When they did a hardware refresh, they took their old hardware, they took it to a different closet, they went and plugged it in and turned it on, and they were using that for dev, test, QA, right? The science experiments that, we all like to geek out and play with, right? And then finding out that their backup strategy consisted of replicating their Synology NASs between each other, right? Doesn't really help for any kind of issue with the data being corrupted or any ransomware situations, right? So, we came in with a free VMware, a free virtualization, review of their situation, kind of came up with, some of these gaps that they maybe were not looking at. And we were able to go in there, explained to them, the difference between what a backup and recovery solution kind of really look like. It's not really replication. It's having immutable backups. It's, the 3-2-1, right? Three backups, 2 of them on different media, 1 off-site, right? And then, maybe 1 in the cloud, maybe 1 immutable, right? That kind of conversation. And so we were able to come in with a virtualization platform on new hardware. We were able to plumb for a DR situation so that they could have, when their budget allowed, they could have another cluster at a local area that they're using for their DR environment. And then we were able to make sure they had that backup immutability so that a ransomware attack or someone, a bad actor, an angry employee can't just go in there and delete a bunch of stuff. And then those deletions get carried over to the replicated data set. And then they can't recover from that. So just kind of wanted to bring that up. Chris, I know you and I worked on this together. Did you have anything to add about this case study?
Yeah, this was a fun one for my team, right? We, as you mentioned, we came in with kind of a new virtualization strategy, and it was from start to finish, this took about a month. So, and it was kind of in that same ballpark that you guys are all in terms of number of VMs, right? We spent a lot of time upfront kind of designing the solution, listening to the customer, really hearing what their concerns were and where they thought, they had gaps. We identified some others. We designed the solution, put it in, and and like I said, it took all in about a month to migrate everything over, and no, everything went well, and the customer's happy, at least today.
Yeah, and then when they have that budget, they can come in and they can implement a DR solution, and it's not going to there's not going to be a lot of rework, right? Since we went into that situation with that architecture in mind. So absolutely.
And another thing to throw out there too, and we know, especially with this audience, there's some novelty to real BC conversations, business continuity and disaster recovery, because of the fact that in tribal enterprise in any country writ large, we know, in fact, we were just talking to a property, and who you are on this call yesterday, where the business continuity discussion, a DR play has business implications where you can't take slot machines and install them somewhere else and run a casino when bad things happen. We know that has to stay in one spot. So when we start talking business continuity and real business continuity, what happens when a flood hits, and I've got friends in various properties that have had floods and water pipes break and the casino's down because they literally can't go somewhere else. That kind of strategy with what you guys are talking about, the case studies we know are some of them are unique to tribal enterprise because of how commercial properties have to operate with compacts and legal issues and all this kind of stuff. So as a team, as a tribal enterprise team, part of my job, having had some of this pain in my past and working with these guys, is to say, hey, and let's think about this from a lens of what it looks like to work in native business. And we focus a lot on that with the tribal enterprise team here, specifically because we should be asking different questions. And it doesn't, in general commercial business or multi-site, we've got limitations. And you guys all know that on this call as the audience, because we have, in some cases, we've got some strictures that not everyone has. So those are part of that assessment when we look at the situations. The constraints, we may have constraints that are unique to this vertical. We understand that. And certainly we want you guys holding us accountable when you're asking questions. Say, hey, oh, by the way, I know you'd love to do that, but we also have to think about it from this perspective. So we try to make sure we do that and know that it's unique. And it's what makes it really fun working in tribal enterprise. So just an additional thought there, that we see you, we understand that part of the space. So thank you, Chris and Jason, for letting me do a plug in there for native business.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. DR is not the same to all people, right? It really depends on your risk and your business and, what you consider to be, high level. And, a lot of times, the IT team is kind of dragging the rest of the organization with them. Like, hey, we need business continuity. We need this, and, you're asking all your application owners and your leadership, and they're like, yeah, well, everything has to be up 100% of the time, all the time. Okay, well, that's expensive, right? So we can help kind of have those conversations with you, with your leadership. We can help craft those things, right? It's definitely not one size fits all. So perfect, Jeremy. All right, so here is, I mentioned earlier, right, with the other case study, right, where we came in and we did a hypervisor assessment. That's a free thing that we offer. Any kind of pilot planning that you guys are looking for, this is something that we can help with. Just want to kind of throw this on the screen. If you guys want, you can pull out your phone, grab that QR code, and then you guys can book some time with us. That's kind of what we're hoping for. We love talking about customers' technology challenges and coming up with ways to fix them and help and what can we do to see what we can help with. Chris, did you have anything to add on this?
No, I think you covered it, and so.
All right, Jeremy.
Yeah, I might just mention quick plug for the team here. So the way that Arctiq goes to market, right? It's a pre-sales motion, and I'm not going to give away everybody's time, but the point is that we know everybody on this call, listening to this call, has vendors they're currently working with. If you didn't, you probably wouldn't be here because you wouldn't be asking the same questions. We understand that. We also understand this is a very long game and a relationship that begins maybe today, maybe we're already working with you. Use us as a validation tool, if nothing else, with your other vendors. Use us to have those conversations to say, hey, we checked with some other characters over here. We watched a webinar the other day. Use us to do that. There's no commit to say, oh, you got to sign a check or a PO or we're going to bait and switch you. Not the thing. We're here to educate. And long game, if we can provide value and we can help an organization, we want to be memorable in that way. Not memorable because what happened at the event, or not memorable because somebody got on a table. Memorable because we actually provided something you either didn't know or it validated what you're already doing. Use this in that way and feel free to do it. Reach out to the names that were posted in the chat. Jason Gordon's going to take point on that from Arctiq. But we want to offer it not trivially, but actually as part of what we do and our specific go-to-market for tribal enterprise.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I think that's a good lead into the next slide. Michelle, can you post poll 4, please? All right, while Michelle is doing that, I kind of want to talk at a high level on this slide, right? So here we kind of talk about Arctiq's M5 VMware assessment services, right? So we have a strategic assessment. The one on the left is free. My time is free. This is what we deliver to the customer, right? So if you're an organization just beginning your VMware strategy evaluation and you need some guidance, we can definitely help with that. That is complimentary. If you're more of an organization that you're ready to move forward with an implementation and you need detailed technical and financial planning, the middle solution is probably the best for you. That's a paid engagement. The interesting part of the first one is we'll come in with some recommendations, but that'll just be kind of high level and it probably won't have a deliverable attached to it. The middle one will have deliverable, high level and low level kind of technical recommendations on the best way to move forward with your infrastructure and what we see some of the gaps that maybe you're not seeing. Or maybe you are seeing them and you want to be able to come up with a deliverable to show your leadership so that it's not just you or your voice in the room saying, hey, we've got gaps. And then the one on the right is, hey, we've identified some recommendations. We've identified some gaps. How do we go and deploy those, right? And that's our M5 optimization service. And that's really for, hey, we know what the problem is and we agree with you and we want to get those resolved. Chris, did you have anything to add here?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
All right, Jeremy, any questions?
No, I think it's great. I appreciate you clarifying that. I mean, obviously, like I said, prepaid, our pre-sale stuff, that's what we do. And then we can also go soup to nuts all the way through delivery. Use this as you need from the audience. So appreciate the detail on that. I know it's an eye chart. It's kind of supposed to be, right, Jason? You did that on purpose to make people have to kind of focus. There's a lot in that. The point of this slide is there's a lot. Not for you to memorize it or read it, but it's an entire engagement methodology, not just simply a, hey, how are you doing? And let's scribble something down. But it's going to be deep and it's going to be helpful and it's going to weigh 16 ounces when you get done and there's going to be binding on it if you need there to be.
Nice. Awesome. All right. So I'm just going to throw up this last slide just for you guys to kind of review on your own. And I think we're kind of moving into the last poll here. Did you want to kind of talk about this poll, Jeremy, at all before we kind of ask for some Q&A if there are any questions for our technical team?
Yeah, and I think it's obvious why we're asking this question, guys. It's your timeline. We want to get an idea of where people are at. It's anonymous there, so we don't know specifically. So we're not trying to say, oh, it's coming up yesterday. We have to go make you a phone call. But the point is that if there's emergency here, typically we find that the licensing drives a huge amount of urgency because you've got to make a commit. We want to know. So if that's the case and you need something done faster, let us know. It gives us an idea where the audience is at. And certainly we're going to pivot into whatever's most important for you guys. A lot of big decisions. I would recommend that if you have 6 months, start now. It's like, when do you plant a tree? You probably want to plant it now, but for the tree to get big when you need it to be, the sooner you start on that, it really gives you the room to make good decisions because those are long game decisions. So more feedback you give us, the more we can be helpful.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so to kind of sum up the whole webinar, I really just wanted to make sure that, hey, this is really, if you guys have if you guys already have a virtualization platform and you want to make sure you're getting the biggest bang for your buck, if that's something you need help with, we're definitely here for you. If you want to look and pivot at some other things, and maybe you want to talk about some other business things that are also occurring, then we can help you with that as well, whether that be disaster recovery and business continuity, or maybe some triggers that may be coming up. I think that's something that we can help with. And with that being said, Chris, did you have anything else you'd like to add before we go to Q&A if there are any questions?
Yeah, I just want to say it again. Thank you everybody for taking the time today. I know you guys are super busy, and I'm I hope this was useful, and again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I echo Chris's thank you and sincerity for that. Jeremy, any last words?
One last thing to say is, as you guys have met this team, we work specifically, this team is focused on tribal enterprise. Everybody does other things too, but we've assembled this to focus and be good at it. We also work with native-owned companies specifically to go to market. So if you've got tribal preference, if you like working with folks that understand this space, then let me know and let Jason Gordon know, and we'll reach out. We'll tell you how that works because it's a major focus for Arctiq. So not coming at you with just general information, but knowledge of the vertical as well. So I really appreciate the time giving us this much time on a topic that not everybody's into, but those that are geeking out on it, we really enjoy being able to share some of this knowledge. And I think with that, we've got a couple of minutes left for Q&A. Like you said, Jason, I'll let you do that.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? I'm looking in the chat, but maybe I'm looking at the wrong one. Does anybody see any questions that we can kind of talk about for the next 3 or 4 minutes?
I didn't see any. If you guys on the call have any last minute questions, speak now or forever hold your breath.
Stu, did you have anything you wanted to kind of talk about that maybe we haven't gone over yet?
No, I think you guys covered it pretty well. So I've been keeping an eye on the chat. I haven't seen any questions come in. So
all right. Well, perfect. Well, then thanks everyone. I just want to thank everybody for their time, and this has been awesome for me. And hopefully you guys found this helpful. Hopefully you walk away from this with the idea of a plan or a plan for a plan, and then you guys can add some value, and we helped you out there. So with that being said, I guess we'll turn it over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, echoing the same thing. Thanks for everybody for being on the call. Thank you guys for being here and partnering with us for this webinar. Just a reminder for all the attendees that you'll receive an email tomorrow with a copy of this recording, so you can watch it again or forward it to anybody else in your team who you think would benefit. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us here at TribalHub, info@tribalhub.com, and we will put you in touch with everybody if you need. So with that, have a great afternoon, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, fellow
everybody.
panelists.
Thanks,
Thanks
bye.
everyone.